cap K, then, I'm sorry, no, it'll be soft power, then midterms, cap K, and then the case and narratives.
Okay.
So just one more time, that's soft power, midterms, cap K, case and narratives.
Yeah. Okay. Two more speeches.
Is the judge ready?
Yep.
Where was narratives at the very end?
What's the,
Narratives, where did we go?
oh, the narratives are at the very end, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Excellent. And the affirmative team, I'm sorry, you guys are ready?
No.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Soft power, there's no link, and the affirmative team basically proves the point. Soft power is not effectual in society, we're dropping that. Moving on to midterms. Midterms have not been conceded by the negative team. We extended all of the evidence and said that there are no warrants under the affirmative team's addressal, and so as a result, they simply argued that the Republicans have a majority, and so that argument does flow. On to cap K. Now this is the biggest argument. There are a couple things I want to address here for you today so that you understand the voters. So the biggest thing here is the idea of the alternative. Now our alternative is basically to increase the pedagogy, it's to increase the pathology so we understand exactly how to analyze where this violence is coming from, and it's coming from the capitalist system. I would like to expand my Zizek evidence, my Brett's evidence, my Neoclis evidence, my Deleuze evidence, and I'd like to read this score piece of evidence from 2010 that says, quote, the policy conversation hasn't caught up to what's happening in the forefront of the discipline. One of the hallmarks of the standard economic model, which hails from the 19th century, is that the people are considering relatively unchanging, but there are no feedback loops from today's choices to tomorrow's desires. This accords with an old formulation of human nature is fixed, and this view still dominates the policy conversation. Newer thinking in behavioral economics, cultural evolution, and social networking that has developed as a result of interdisciplinary work in psychology, biology, and sociology yields a view of humans as far more malleable. As economic actors, we can change too. This has profound implications on our ability to shift from one way of living to another and better off in the process, carded process. And so basically the idea here is that we can change the individual ideology, their outlook, and as a result we can change capitalism. We are changing capitalism through rejection. We are changing capitalism through changing the ultimate pathology. And so it does actually cause an effect. It does bring about a rejection of capitalism, which in this case, if the affirmative team actually brings about capitalism, we see we see violence, and we see all the things not solved for. Now we look at the affirmative team's case, and their attempts to change the status quo through pathology is the same method we're using. We're changing it through pathology. We're looking at it that way. So let's see here. So just looking at the structural analysis, even if they do win the narratives or education focus are good, our case turns and our K are reasons why their use of the narratives and why their education is a bad form of education. Even if they win a framing argument that we should look to the discourse of the 1AC, we are winning that their discourse rhetorically supports a policy that is bad. That's proven by all of our case and K arguments. Their policy is bad. The K is bad. I'm sorry, the capitalism is bad. The K is how we analyze it. Also, looking at that, human nature can change. Therefore, they can't perm. The affirmative team cannot perm because upping industry and then arguing that you're going to down industry are two very different things. They're trying to bring about a new industry, and they can't bring that about without accepting the capitalist system and accepting the ideology that capitalism works. So moving on to the case, I would like to extend a couple cards. First of all, there's no challenging warrant in the argument where they extended the Cal 5 evidence from the 1AC that talks about the voices being excluded. They simply said the voices are being excluded. Moving on the show evidence, show 13, I'd like to extend the show 13 evidence that talks about trafficking. It is relevant here. It does talk about specifically sex industries, and so it does refer specifically to this scenario, and therefore follows through. So the implementation of the affirmative teams plan would cause an increase in trafficking. I'd also like to extend the IT-8 evidence that talks about legislation would up violence. The affirmative team suggests that policies would protect prostitutions, so they are using legal legislation, and if they are using legislation and regulations, they are upping violence according to IT-8. I'd like to extend the Sullivan 11 evidence, Sullivan and Jeffries evidence, which talks about we don't know all of the factors, we don't know all of the scenarios, and that really follows through to the narratives argument. So looking at the narratives argument, I'd like to extend all of the narrative evidence. The affirmative team doesn't provide any evidence that specifically warrants their arguments. They simply reinstate their arguments.
It actually hurts to use narrative.
Oh, yeah, it does hurt. Yeah, it hurts to use the narratives in this scenario because it's a part-to-whole fallacy. You're narrowing the topic too far. There are so many different narratives that you could take that when you're trying to analyze the whole situation from a specific narrative or two, then you're creating a situation in which you're interpreting everything through broad spectrum. It's like taking tunnel vision and trying to understand your entire surroundings through tunnel vision. It doesn't work. Yes. And so the motive issues here today are that capitalism brings about violence. And you, as the judge, have an obligation to reject capitalism, to reject the affirmative team's plan because they support capitalism. Zizek offers arguments for that. The capitalism causes violence because it devalues, it commodifies the individual. And this is how we should analyze the situation. We are analyzing where violence and racism and all of the discrimination and wars come from through rejecting capitalism, not through the implementation of the affirmative team's plan.
I will use the bleachers that I have left.
Okay.